I'm John Batchelor. My professionals, John Fund of the National Review Online, David Drucker of Washington Examiner, Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. Gentlemen, Vladimir Putin is saying that you don't launch those strikes without permission, which is strikingly similar to how Vladimir Putin launched strikes in eastern Ukraine without the permission of the government in Kiev. At the same time, I'm following here, the President of the United States will address the UN's climate summit on Tuesday, that is within these next hours, the 23rd. On Wednesday, the 24th, the President of the United States will address the General Assembly and on ISIS, and he will also lead a Security Council discussion on ISIS and foreign fighters on Wednesday. So the president is due in New York to speak of his ISIS policy after launching what the Pentagon characterizes as an hours-long strike on Raqqa, which is Syrian territory. I begin with you, Mr. Fund. The president is launching this strike at the beginning of UN Organizing Week, where he will appear. Does this take political risks, John, for, say, Russia to walk out on him?
I think the president wouldn't be that upset. Russia has convinced most of the world that it's a rogue state right now and whose word cannot be trusted. I think the president would have been in far more political peril if he had shown up empty-handed at the UN and led in a verbal attack on ISIS without having actually laid a glove on them and without actually revealing that he had real allies behind him who were really going to cooperate.
David, the president did not go to the United Nations to ask permission or to ask for a vote to secure the attack on the ISIS. Was that a political calculation on his part? I'm thinking back about how George Bush went through those machinations when he moved against Iraq.
Well, look, I'm thinking that it's very possible it was. I think one of the reasons he didn't ask Congress for authorization to use military force anew is because he didn't want to take a chance of the whole thing devolving and not getting anywhere, the same way he didn't get anywhere last year. I also think the president was very sensitive, particularly because of the naysayers in his own party, that he didn't want to look like a wartime president. He didn't want to look like he was asking the United States or other countries to go to war. And I think that's why he's trying to treat this as an overgrown counterterrorism measure. If it works, it really doesn't matter what it's called, but I think that's why the president has treated it the way he has.
Thaddeus, your comment on the United Nations. The president's coming to make an address to the General Assembly. He's going to speak on the climate summit, which seems kind of below the fold after this news tonight. And I remind everyone, the strikes are ongoing. We just had the first report 55 minutes ago of Tomahawk bomber and fighter strikes at Raqqa. So, Thaddeus, coming to the United Nations, is the president going to take political risks here? They won't applaud him, Thaddeus.
Well, John, just the incongruity of what he's talking about at the UN. I mean, he's a warrior and a weatherman. What's he going to say? It's sunny over Syria and full of Tomahawk missiles intermittently. Right. I mean, to me, I think the double standard, I mean, we talked about what the Bush administration went through with the United Nations. And for a Democrat, a progressive Democrat, to do this prior to going to the UN and at least going through the motions, I, as a Republican, applaud him for showing leadership and not being beholden to this global Tammany Hall before he defended America's interests. But I just find it interesting, the dichotomy of how people would treat a Republican president who did the same.
I note that Micah Zenko of the Council on Foreign Relations has a tweet up about the ironies. Mr. Fund, to come back to you. A U.S. fighter jet sold to Gulf countries explicitly to counter Iran, now bombing a terror group that Iran is at war with in Syria that Iran is partnered with. We need a scorecard for this, John, but this is not what President Obama was elected for. Has he convinced the American people this is a war we want to fight?
Well, certainly he has not convinced them that it will require a new relationship with Iran and other old adversaries. This is power politics at its messiest. I think in the end, assuming the United States gets a decent result from its war against the Islamic State, Iran is going to have to be advantaged by this. The negotiations for any kind of dismantling of its nuclear missile, the negotiation advantage moves to Iran. and they probably will have temporary reprieve from some of the Gulf states if they behave themselves and stay out of the conflict or don't arm any of the principals there. So the Iranians are breathing a sigh of relief tonight because the attention is off of them.
David, Iran is the winner?
Well, I don't know that I want to equate one with the other. I mean, ISIS has to be defeated one way or the other. I think the real question tonight is this the part of a sustained, aggressive campaign to defeat ISIS, however long that it takes, so that they're not a threat to the United States and our allies? That's problem number one, or at least that's the problem at hand. Dealing with Iran is a whole other matter, and the administration either gets that right or it doesn't, and I don't think anything that happens with ISIS should distract from the administration's attempt to fashion a nuclear agreement with Iran.
What we learned with the Bush administration, Thaddeus, where you served Congress, was what's the exit strategy? You've got 20 seconds. Tell me what the exit strategy is, Thaddeus.
Well, I think there's no exit strategy. You have to win. There has to be victory. And I think that they are linked with the Iranians who have a Molotov-Ribbentrop deal with the Syrian regime. You have to view that region in a comprehensive whole, or these types of things continue to occur.
Thaddeus McCotter, WJR, the great voice of the Great Lakes. John Fund of the National View Online. David Drucker of the Washington Examiner. I'm John Batchelor.